Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn and...
I'm Joe.
We've talked about a lot of different things over the past months. Lots of weird different things. But today I'm going to tell some stories from regular people. These are in no particular order. They're just things I pulled up. Okay, about unicorns. This I thought was really fascinating. So this guy said, there's sometimes anomalies in roe deer that cause them to grow...
Roe deer, is that like from a particular country?
No, I think it's a kind of deer. Now
Never heard of it before.
I'll look up roe deer. Oh dear, roe deer. The roe deer, also known as the roe, western roe deer, or European roe deer, is a species of deer. All right?
Okay, deer.
So in the roe deer, sometimes they have anomalies that cause them to grow a single horn in the middle of their head.
I think I've actually seen pictures of, like, you know, regular antler deer in the U.S. where it's like one horn, middle of the head, but it's an antler, so it's kind of weird and, you know, weird. So creepy unicorn.
They think it's that phenomenon of growing this one horn in the middle of their forehead occurs naturally when their two horns, for some unknown reason, who knows why, grow and twist into a single horn. The deer are found in Europe and the British Isles, and it's possibly why Scotland has myths of unicorns. Now,
see,
deer are not horses, but a deer with a single horn on his head would look kind of magical. It would look kind of different, especially because it's an anomaly, which means it doesn't occur frequently.
There seems to be this process where people say something or think of something concrete, and then over time it evolves into an abstract form. And then over time, it evolves from the abstract form to a new concrete form.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like zigzagging between concrete and abstract. So, for instance, you start with something. Concrete. Here's a deer with a deformity that has one horn. It goes to an abstraction, which in this case is probably like cave art or like a story, or there could be mythology, abstract mythology, like somebody says there's a deer of the forest and it has one horn, but it's an abstraction. There's not like, so after that it goes to a new concrete form where it is a unicorn. It's its own discrete thing that really exists in reality. Or so they say. And that might happen multiple times as it becomes more and more divorced from its original concept.
I just did a simple search for roe deer with single horn.
That looks, I mean, it's like it looks like a deer, but it has a unicorn
like
horn.
A unicorn horn. Okay, so think about how indigenous peoples will take a sighting of, for instance, an albino deer or an albino buffalo, and they'll create a whole mythology around that. So I can totally see how a sighting of a deer having only one horn on its head, which would be unusual, that they would give it some kind of special place in their story.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty interesting. Okay, the next one is about morticians who experience paranormal activities at work.
Okay.
So at the funeral home. So this guy, he's a funeral director and embalmer, and he's done it for 26 years. During that time, he lived full-time in 3 different funeral homes. Lived in funeral homes. That just sounds so gross.
Does that mean he lived in haunted houses?
Well, we'll see, won't we? He spent many nights sleeping or taking naps on a sofa in a visitation room. And as we talked about before, visitation rooms often look like very fancy little parlors. So he would sometimes take a nap in those rooms, which is, I don't know why it makes me feel it's just like gross. It's not
he's
scary.
Taking a nap?
It just seems, no, sleeping and being in your off time around dead bodies just seems gross. Gross, like eating meat is gross to me. It just seems like, it just doesn't seem like something you want to do around dead things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You don't usually, nobody looks at like roadkill and says, yummy.
Or I want to cuddle down next to it or something.
Yeah, or I want to go to bed right there.
Yeah. So he said that after a very long day, he'd sometimes end work at 3 or 4 a.m. Now, a very long day means that he was dealing with a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So a very long day, and then having a busy day the next day, starting at 6 or 7 a.m., means there's more dead bodies. Mm-hmm. So he thinks that lots of paranormal activity was going on around him all the time. He thinks there was always something unusual happening, but most of it was really subtle. And he could explain it away or ignore it, or he just didn't notice it because he was busy working. Mm-hmm. For example, whispering voices when he was alone in the building, turning a corner and seeing a dark figure turn the corner at the far end of a hallway, things like that. Mm-hmm. You know, things that were subtle, things that you could say, it's exhaustion, or it's my imagination playing tricks on me. But there were a few more distinct occurrences that had really big impacts early in his career. So one of them is late one night in a funeral home. This funeral home had been built in a converted single-family home. So it was a regular house that had been converted into a funeral home, which is what you sometimes see in smaller towns and in the Midwest especially. Older towns, you know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the building had one long straight hallway running through the center of the building with offices, viewing rooms, bathrooms, etc. on either side. Not unlike what I described at that funeral home that we were laying out that little boy. Both the front and the rear doors at either end of the hallway were made of glass. So if you came through one of them and you're looking down that hallway, the one at the far end was like looking in a mirror at night. You know, just the way the light would reflect off of it.
As in, you can see your reflection?
Yeah. I would guess.
You can see your reflection.
I would say.
This is where it's going?
I don't know. You could see. I haven't read the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
You could say that if it's like a mirror, you would probably be seeing your reflection, because if you come through a door and you're looking straight ahead, and straight ahead is a door that looks like a mirror, you would see your reflection. And the hallway. You'd see everything. So they'd had a visitation, which, you know, you could call it a viewing or a wake, depending upon what your lifestyle or where you're from. And it lasted till like 11 o'clock at night, which is nuts. That's just those people must have just been exhausted. So he said, in the funeral business, you never know what could happen in the night. And he was the lowest ranking person on the staff. So it was his job to stay and make sure the entire building was cleaned and prepared for whatever was going to take place the next day. So he had to wait until all those people left. So 11 o'clock at night, he's vacuuming and he's in the main hallway, and he looked up, and as clearly as he could see his own reflection in that mirrored door at the glass door at the end, he saw a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, walk across the hall behind him from their casket selection room.
That's creepy.
Into their business office. Yeah, so he's looking in the mirror thing, essentially a mirror.
He's seeing past himself.
And he sees himself, and behind him he sees a little girl walk across the hallway. He says it never even crossed his mind that it could be anything other than the grieving family had accidentally left a child behind, which that'd be weird. That'd be really weird. Yeah. He'd never seen it happen before. But weird things
like that happen where kids will hide.
That's true.
They don't notice.
And I guess if you're in the midst of grief and, you know, whatever. So he started to realize that wasn't what had happened when he spent 10 minutes searching the very small business room, that office, that had only one door in a locked window and he couldn't find a little girl. So he didn't let it stop him from doing his job. He kept on vacuuming. But now he no longer looks up. He just looks at the carpet because he doesn't want to see stuff.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like covering your eyes at night, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense.
Or me not looking in the mirror at night in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But on the other hand, if you, like, I've seen things out of the corner of my eyes. So I know that what you're seeing when you're looking out with your eyes is not actually a very good image. Your brain is reconstructing a lot of stuff. If I just bashed you over the head and you completely lost all your short-term memory, I mean, your immediate memories were lost. When you open your eyes and are now getting new information, things look weird initially. Like if you have just passed out or whatever, that's just how it is. And then as you get more information, your brain knows what even to look for. And so you start seeing a normal image, you know. But it's only because your brain is using a lot more information from its memory to make sense of what it's seeing. And that's your fovea, the center of your vision. Your peripheral vision is way worse. If you think of it like pixels, you have like a relatively low resolution image in the center of your vision, and you have just a random cloud of sparse pixels going out from the center of your vision. Yeah, they're not like regularly spaced. Well, I mean, more or less regularly spaced, but they're very sparse. You're not getting as much information, anywhere near as much information in the corner of your vision. So if you see something out of the corner of your eye, that's really super low information. It could have been as little as one cell on the surface of your eye picked up, or it projected into your brain a noise or a misinterpretation, as much as a single cell can misinterpret anything. And so you really just can't trust very, very fast events with your eyes.
And don't you think, too, that it's just kind of human nature to try and make sense of patterns?
Yeah.
So if you see a dark shape, your brain tries to figure out what is that dark shape, and you fill in the visual blanks.
Yeah, exactly. Just the same way that you're using your memory in large part to make sense of what you're immediately seeing, the context matters a lot. If you're in a haunted house and you have adrenaline going, and you know you're in a haunted house, and you know it's haunted, and you know you're looking through the ghost hunter camera, and you're expecting to see a ghost, and then you see random brain noise on your eye, then what is that?
Okay, so I think that's really interesting, and I agree with you. But here we live in a house that by all accounts should be haunted. There's somebody buried in the yard. People
Allegedly.
have died in this house. The man who last lived in this house desperately wanted to come home to die, and they wouldn't let him. And all he wanted to do, and all he said repeatedly was, "I just want to go home. I just want to go home." These are things that should make it be a haunted house, correct? And I believe
you've seen
in ghosts. But I don't feel creeped out in this house at all, and I've stayed here all by myself many, many times, as have you. And
yeah, so it's not necessarily the case that if you see a ghost, that's a scary event. And this is a really important concept too. Your body is making it scary. Nothing inherently says it's scary. In fact, nothing inherently says it's happy or sad or anything. It's just an event. You're the one making it any emotion. So, like, for instance, let's say there's some existential terror lurking in metaphysical space, and it's real, and, whatever. Like, for instance, there's a soul-eating demon flying around in the astral planes, and it can just pop and eat your soul at any time. Should you be scared of that?
Yes, if something's going to eat your soul.
Yeah, okay. Your soul, presumably, is only loosely associated with your body, right? I mean, most people would say your soul can detach from your body and persist.
Yeah.
Your body, even if it didn't have a soul, quote unquote, would still respond the exact same way, presumably. I mean, I can make a robot that behaves identical to a person.
Can you really? I
can't, but presumably you could. And you could do that just by recording a person and having the thing reproduce it. So, granted, you can make a robot that looks like a person, acts like a person, and can do whatever you just recorded to it. You can trick somebody into thinking, yes, this thing is just like me. As in, trick them to think it has a soul or not, or whatever. It doesn't matter. That it can get arbitrarily close to a person, but it doesn't have a soul. And you can make it scared. So you can make it scared, it has no soul, even though the soul-eating demon can't eat its soul, it doesn't have a soul. So it's scared of something that cannot happen, is meaningless to it. Let's say you then attached a soul to the robot, and it's scared, and then the demon comes and eats the soul. The robot is still scared, even though it now no longer has a soul.
Nothing has changed.
So there's a lot of parameters there, like maybe the soul influences you, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter the particular scenario. It's the fundamental concept that there's your body and your consciousness are two, in expanded whatever metaphysics, those are two different things. You don't necessarily have to respond in a metaphysical sense to some exotic phenomenon like a ghost in any emotional way. Now, if the ghost is going to break your kneecaps and kill you, then your body should be scared.
Okay, so here's a question. Have you ever heard of anyone saying that they had been directly injured or knew of someone who had been directly killed by a ghost?
I mean, I've seen stories that are almost certainly fake on the internet.
I have never heard. I mean, there'll be somebody say, "Oh, I got so scared I fell and broke my leg," or "I got so scared that and then something fell on me, and I think that the thing that fell on me was pushed by a ghost," or
And you've heard stories like they had a heart attack.
Yeah, but really and truly, like you're just sitting here in your living room and it's 11 o'clock at night, and a ghost appears in front of you and puts their bony hands around your neck and chokes you to death.
Yeah.
And that's verified by the coroner.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm not freaked out in this house.
How about this? Have you ever heard of a story of a sleep paralysis demon killing somebody?
No.
I mean, I haven't looked at many. I haven't searched for that.
I have not searched for it either, but I've read a lot of stories firsthand.
Actually,
first-person stories.
You wouldn't hear.
They'd be dead.
They'd be dead. They couldn't.
And they couldn't tell
say
you
why.
That that's
they would
why.
just.
But wouldn't it be that the coroner would have looked at their body and said, well, they'd probably say it was a heart attack.
They wouldn't say. The coroner would not come and say, after the autopsy, whatever, it was a sleep paralysis.
No, the coroner would say it was a heart attack. Okay, so this story is about a ghost sighting that changed this person from a skeptic into a believer. When this lady had her son, she lived in a house that was 110 years old. It was a beautiful house. It had been restored to its original condition, and it was just wonderful. It had solid walls, high ceilings, huge rooms, a swinging door between the dining room and the living room, so it swang?
I don't know.
Has swung.
It's like swimming.
Swang. It went both ways. So there were times that she'd catch something in her peripheral vision, a flash, a slight movement, but she didn't really think about it too much because she had other things to think about. She was a single mom with a baby, and she, just didn't even pay too much attention about it. one evening after a very long day at work, the baby was about 6 months old, and she'd taken him upstairs, and they were in her bedroom watching, well, she was watching a movie. Presumably a 6-month-old baby is not watching a movie. Mm-hmm. The swinging door in the kitchen, between the kitchen and the dining room, swooshed. And if you ever have been in a house that had one of those doors, it makes a distinctive noise.
Oh,
because
yeah,
it's swoosh, and it goes click, click, swoosh, click, click, swoosh, click, click.
We had one.
Well, we had one in the house of my great-grandparents, but you have never been in that house.
I have specific memories of hearing that. Exactly what you're talking about. No, I mean, like, we've been in a house a lot. Some house. The Creamery?
No, the Creamery did not have one.
I know the one in Minong, your rental.
No, it did not have one.
It didn't swing.
It had like saloon doors. Yeah, no, that's not.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know. It's because that door would swing both ways. She usually kept it propped open, which makes sense because She apparently she had a roommate because she thought that maybe the roommate had closed it or moved the little thing that propped it open, and then it had swung. But then it just kept happening, and it kept swinging back and forth and back and forth. So finally she went to the top of the stairs and called her roommate's name to say, go stop that door from swinging, go prop it back open. But the roommate didn't answer, and the door kept swooshing. So she called the roommate's cell phone, and the roommate wasn't even home. She was a block away with friends, but the roommate came home immediately. They called, they were going to call 911. They got 911 already dialed into the phone, and she was just getting ready to dial the next one because she thought someone was in that house that shouldn't be in that house, that had been making that door move. But everybody descended upon the house, so everybody looked around, and they didn't find anybody there. But what they did find was a gas leak. The whole downstairs was full of gas. So she said she didn't know who swooshed that door, but she did know that if she and her son had gone to sleep without, the door swooshing, that it kept her alerted, that, something's going on downstairs and, aggravated. If that had not occurred, they would probably have died.
Okay, so let's say you're a ghost.
Yeah.
And you are a good ghost, and there's a gas leak somehow. So you want to prevent the person from dying who lives there, the live person from dying. So what's your first thought? Oh, I'll try to influence something. And it just so happens that you can influence a door. You know what I mean? So
okay, so
this is the implication. It's a ghost that's helping
the living people.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I think. So if the ghost had knocked perfume bottles off her dresser or slammed the bathroom door next to her bedroom, she would have thought, that's weird, that's creepy, or whatever, but she wouldn't have gone downstairs to investigate. Now, there are other things the ghost could have done downstairs besides make that door swoosh back and forth. And she didn't say where the gas leak was, but probably was in the kitchen or near the kitchen, because usually near the kitchen you have, your equipment stuff like the water heater and the furnace and a gas stove. So if the ghost had, could have pushed pans out of a cupboard or, I don't know, whatever, things like that, turned on a radio and turned off a radio, something weird.
So I think what interests me is okay, so how about this? The ghost sees there's a gas leak somehow, and so it tears off all the cabinets from the walls and demolishes one of the walls.
But that would be destructive.
Okay, but have you heard of any story even remotely like that? Caves in and implodes the
refrigerator? Okay, so again, let's go back at the nature of a ghost.
How about blows open the windows so fresh air can get in?
Okay, let's go back to the nature of a ghost. And we've talked about this before. So imagine that it's very difficult to make things happen, to push beyond the veil through whatever membranous thing there is between the dead zone and the living zone. And so you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing. And it would be perhaps easier to push on a door that easily swings back and forth than it would be to crash through a window or tear a cabinet off the wall.
On top of the implication that the ghost can smell the gas, the ghost wants to help the person, the ghost can influence things. The implication is that they can't influence big things. They can influence smaller things that are maybe potentially easier to influence, like a breeze that flaps the doors.
Right. Okay, so let's go to another place in this story. What else could it have been to make that door flap back and forth and back and forth?
So we probably don't know, but if it forms a pretty good seal, a pressure change could.
No, those doors don't, because otherwise they wouldn't swing back and forth, because it has to have enough
space. So another thing is, if it doesn't come back perfectly centered, like on one side, then there could be, at some point, it loosens and then comes loose once. So it wouldn't be repeated, but it could do the flap thing once. Another thing is mice, rats.
Oh, come on, you're really reaching now.
That I don't think so.
A mouse? A mouse weighs like a tenth of an ounce.
What the person is hearing isn't the door, it's the mice doing something else. Or it could be something completely different entirely, like it's birds outside, or there's another, like the wind is, or pressure changes causing something else to move. Like, where was it? Oh, the greenhouse with the plastic that flaps in the wind. And it can be a weird sound. I mean, you can hear it. It's pretty loud. Out there, it's pretty loud. But in here, you can hear it. If you didn't know, or like the stuff coming off the trees, the little walnuts, if you didn't know, you'd be like, what was that? Because it's so infrequent, you might not ever be outside to hear it and see it.
That reminds me, I was on the front porch the other day. Front porch is my new favorite place because it's just so lovely, especially as it gets cooler out. And I was laying on the sofa out there reading, and I could hear squirrels in that tree that's right outside the window. So the squirrels are chattering, and I can see them from where I'm laying, and I'm watching them, and there's a squirrel chasing another squirrel, and they turn around and they chase back and forth. And then they leapt from the branch to the roof of the front porch. And it made such a huge noise.
Really?
It was so loud.
I guess there really isn't much like space between the roof.
No, there's
itself.
An attic up above there.
But it's mostly hollow, right?
I don't know. You're the one who's been up in the attic. I haven't been.
I don't remember seeing anything.
Yeah,
there.
You said there was an opening from the main part of the attic.
It really seems like.
But it was loud. It sounded super loud, and I thought, oh, that might be sometimes when we hear loud bangs. It might just be squirrels jumping from that tree onto the porch.
Well, yeah, that would pretty much be squirrel. I mean, there's the cats.
I've never seen the cats jumping from a tree onto our roof.
Well, they go on the roof.
Oh, obviously they do.
They could chase after a squirrel or something.
That's true. Okay, here, this next one. This person said they used to hear a tapping sound at the base of their wooden bed frame every night. This is when they were 8 years old. And it would start once the digital alarm clock on their desk hit midnight.
That's creepy.
And they would start hearing this tapping noise. And it was always in a slow pattern of 3. So tap, 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 tap. Okay, that's creepy. Right off the bat, I got to say, I would think it had something to do with the digital clock. When it turns over to midnight, there's something that goes on, and that it could be that at noon every day, they're not in their room in a dead quiet room hearing what happens.
That's true. It could be completely...
As it goes from noon,
or
12
something.
to...
I mean, consider, what if the neighbors have some clock
or maybe it's their automatic sprinkler system going.
Yeah, anything that goes off at that particular time.
But in any case, that went on at the same time every single night until the sun came up. And it finally stopped the day they turned 9. So the entire time they were 8 years old, for an entire year, this went on. This kid would scream almost every night and cry, and nobody could tell them what it was, what was doing it, how to make it go away. They were scared. And the only way they could get any relief is the dad would come in to check on the kid and gave him a flashlight. Gave the kid a flashlight. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, so I don't know. So the kid would turn the flashlight on, and it didn't really give off very much light, but once they turned it on, the noise would stop. So they slept with a flashlight under their pillow for years because they did not know what caused that. They did not know. So
they slept with the So you said it started when they're 8?
It started when they're 8, ended the day they turned 9, and it sounds like maybe the dad gave the kid a flashlight for their 9th birthday.
Oh, okay.
So then the kid had the flashlight, and so the kid, when they heard that noise, they would turn on the flashlight and it would stop. So then they never were bothered anymore, and they slept with that flashlight under their pillow in case they had to pull it out and turn it on to make it stop. So houses are full of weird noises.
Yeah.
And
it's not
correlation does not mean causation.
About the time
and about the flashlight.
Yeah. Also, when at night you are in a confused state, 100%, even if there's ghosts and weird, crazy, exotic metaphysical stuff, you still are closer to sleep than usual. So you can't be totally sure about what you're seeing, especially when it's dark. And sounds, same thing. The old meme, the kid, it's at night and the creepy tree branches tapping against the window. Right. I mean,
one thing that comes to my mind is, what the hell was wrong with these people that their 8-year-old kid was screaming and crying, begging them for help every night for an entire year, and they didn't give the kid another room or
so
let the kid sleep with them?
There is another facet here, is that we're looking at this through the lens of the person's memories, which are imperfect. True. And so it could have been more like, here's the kid, at some point when they're 8, there was a couple weeks on and off when they heard a tapping sound, and it wasn't at 12. They looked once or twice and saw it was 12. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There could be huge differences.
That I totally agree. So, but the bottom underlying question is, do ghosts avoid being seen or making their presence known when there are lights on? Because that's the thing. People always, they're all freaked out and they leave the lights on.
So like the implication, so there's an implicit kind of assumption that the dark is creepy, ghosts are creepy, therefore ghosts and the dark go together.
I just want to say the reason why darkness is creepy is because you can't see as well.
Yes.
And there could be things that you cannot see, not necessarily paranormal things.
Like Legos or fans that you bust your toe.
Yes. Yeah. I was admiring how my little baby toe does not bend right because I've hit it against chairs in the dark.
Yeah. There's real reason why you don't want to go wandering around at night.
Right.
I mean, I should say, even if there's ghosts, as far as I can tell, if you're out at night, you probably have a higher chance of not getting hit by a car or being hurt or anything, being attacked by a dog.
Well, unless you live in a horrible inner city.
Yeah. So like here in our town, which is a small town, walking around at night is not any more dangerous than walking around in the day.
Right.
Now, if you say, okay, here's your universe that you're used to, but then also there's real sleep paralysis demons and astral hyperdemons and ghosts that can poltergeist you and, malevolent spirits and that can hurt you, then are you more safe at night or in the day? So again, the meme is that if you go out at night, then the ghosts can hurt you.
I also think that when it's dark, you're more apt to see a shape in the darkness because you can't see clearly and misinterpret it as something else. Yeah. I have to say, out of all the weird things that have happened in my life, and I'm not counting sleep paralysis, I'm not counting night terrors, because those things are definitely attached to sleeping, which are going to probably be happening at night. Yeah. But creepy things or things that I cannot explain, the majority of them happen in absolutely broad daylight. So I just don't think that whether there's lights on or lights off, I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not you're going to have a paranormal experience or not at all. If you're having a paranormal experience with the lights on, you probably can assess it better. If something weird happens and the lights on, you probably can see more clearly whether or not it was truly paranormal or just some weird combination of events that occurred that made you think, oh, that was creepy.
And the associated thing, like, okay, I'm expecting creepy things at night, so even if there's ghosts and regular misinterpretations, you're going to be biased towards the ghosts at night, and during the day, you'll be biased the opposite way.
Right.
When potentially that's not necessarily a good idea. It might be that during the day you should be looking more out for ghosts.
Yeah.
Because you potentially won't interpret a ghost as a ghost because you think ghosts only come out at night.
And so many people say they only see or have seen ghosts or other paranormal entities at night. And I think another reason is that during the day, you're usually distracted by the details of life. You're working, you're driving, you're making food, you're watching TV, you're doing all of those things.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, imagine you're driving along the highway to work and you're thinking about the bagel you just got and the coffee's hitting you and you're worrying about XYZ and then on the highway next to you, a car passes and it's a ghost car. It's a car driven by a ghost. The whole car is also a ghostly car, but you wouldn't think anything of it.
You wouldn't even pay attention. You got your mind on other things. Yeah. Okay, so do ghosts watch us? This person says all the time.
That's creepy on a different level.
Yes, they're wasting a lot of time trying to communicate it with us, either because they don't realize that they're dead or they don't want to accept it and move on. Sometimes they feel they have unfinished business that keeps them from moving on. Now, I just have a hard time with that.
This is a meme. Okay, I mean, like, there really is, like, how the world works and how the universe works and how reality works. And then there's the popular conception of how those things work. And one meme is that a spirit, it just hasn't moved on, whatever. We don't know that. If there are ghosts, we don't know how they function. We don't know even if they're people. We don't know anything. We have no idea about anything whatsoever. Even the people who would purportedly really be interacting with them a lot, like mediums. For instance, where does the medium get its information about ghosts? Oh, the ghosts tell them. Okay, you see the problem? What if the ghosts are not dead people, but rather they come from a different dimension, they're aliens, and they're just lying? You don't know. No,
you don't know. You absolutely do not know. But here's why I have a problem with this. I think that if the portal or the progress of somebody who's died, whatever's left over from them, when they've died and they move on, what are they moving on to? And where are they moving on to? If there is such an ability for them to get stuck because they haven't resolved something, most people have not resolved shit
you'd think
in their
there'd
lives.
be like a dam, a clog
of
souls.
Of soul. Oh, that's creepy.
A soul clog.
Yeah, screaming and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Oh,
and then you got the soul plumber snaking. It's like Ghostbusters, but the opposite way.
Yeah.
Instead of pulling them,
we're gonna release this plug.
Like pressure washing the soul hole.
Okay, so one of our most popular episodes ever was the one on kids telling the stories of previous lives. And it continues to be popular. It continues to, my comments on TikTok, on somebody else's TikTok, continues. I get notifications every day of people asking me questions about it and liking it. And it really resonates with a lot of people. And this is just one of the stories. So when this lady's kid was 2 years old, she had him bundled up in his car seat, and they were going for a long car ride late at night. So suddenly the kid's head pops up. And if the kid's 2 years old, so probably they're facing forward. So maybe they'd been, like head over to the side because this is late at night, and then they woke up. So when she said pops up, it's not like the kid's head popped over her seat. The kid's in a car seat. And the kid says, "Mom, you're afraid of bridges, aren't you?" Well, okay, right here I have to stop. I have never met a 2-year-old who could say a sentence like that. Have you ever met a 2-year-old who could say a sentence like that?
I have never seen that personally. I've heard many stories of child prodigy, and they can play the violin at 1-year-old, and they spoke at 2 weeks, and like.
Okay, so I'm assuming that she's paraphrasing for clarity here.
Yeah.
And probably the kid said, "Mama scared bridges," because that just seems like that's very advanced for a 2-year-old. Or maybe my children were all very slow. I don't know. So the lady said she's terrified of bridges. She hates driving on them, and especially at night. And I can understand that if you're someone who's scared of bridges, when you're going over them at night, you can't see how far down.
Makes it worse.
I could understand that. But she didn't say that to the kid. She just said, "A little bit scared, honey." And the kid asks, "Do you know why?" Again, this is not what a 2-year-old would say. So the kid probably just said, "Why?" And so she said, "No, I really don't know why." And then the kid said, "When I was big and you were little, a car got crashed up on the bridge. Everything was turned upside down. Glass got broken, and you were blooding." Then his voice got very, very quiet. "I couldn't save you. I was sad."
That's creepy.
My heart stopped. His father and I looked at each other and then back down at our son, only to find him lean back and fast asleep. They had to pull over. They were pretty shaken up. And she says there are some situations where just having him near her makes her feel like she's being saved from fear or something that's bothering her. Maybe real dangers. I don't know. So I'm not really sure what she means by that. But that's very interesting. And unfortunately, a 2-year-old can't give you much more information than that. It's not like you can ask a 2-year-old, what kind of car were we in? Where was the bridge? How high was the bridge? You can't really get that information.
Well, was she in a car crash?
No, it had to have happened. I mean, he says, "When I was big and you were little, a car got crashed up on the bridge." So when the little kid was big and the mother was little, that would seem to imply that in a previous life, the kid was the parent and the mother was the child.
Well, I was thinking more on like when literally she was younger and the kid wasn't born yet, but in his past life, he was an adult, who saved her.
No, I think he's saying that he was an adult and the mother was a child. And they crashed.
Oh, so like co-occurring previous lives.
Yes. And they crashed because the mother was not in a car accident when she was a child in this life.
Yeah, she
was not in a car accident. At least she doesn't say she
would have
was.
said.
Yeah. So because she doesn't know why she's scared of going over bridges at night.
So the implication is that the reason she's scared
It's a memory of a previous life. Yes. So that was interesting. I like the ones where, and if anybody listening has this occur, question the kid. Try and get some hints and ideas, because there are many different ways you can verify this information.
And people supposedly have.
Yeah.
Right?
If it was a 2-year-old kid, it's pretty hard to get more information because they just don't have the vocabulary, regardless of how she expressed this kid talking. Probably the kid did not talk that clearly because 2-year-olds just don't have the vocabulary. But it's possible that if you ask a kid, what kind, was it a big car? Was it a little car? Was, how big was the road? Were there other cars on the road? That you could get some more information, because you can find out a lot of stuff by doing searches on the internet or getting on like newspapers.com. You can find old newspaper articles about stuff. In this case, if you knew any inkling of where it might have been better, like, for instance, if they asked the kid, were you the mommy or the daddy? Was I a little girl or a little boy? How little was I? Those things that you could put into a search engine in newspapers.com, and you could probably find an article, if one existed, about an accident that occurred on a bridge at night where a father tried to save his infant daughter. There are ways that you can confirm that. Now, what does that mean practically? Beyond just satisfying a morbid curiosity about it, if it's really true that kid has had a memory of a previous life, wouldn't that be kind of, not only for the kid, but also for the mother who's having this unknown fear of bridges? Wouldn't that help them to kind of say, oh, so this is what really happened. I can kind of resolve that in my mind. It seems to me that would be a healing thing. But people don't usually ask those questions of their kids. For one thing, they're usually pretty blindsided. And for another thing, there's almost like a fart in church kind of response, like a titter, like a, well, we're not going to talk about that type of thing. And I'm not really sure why, but people are very reticent to explore that further with their kid. They're just kind of like, that's nice, honey. And then they change the subject. Interesting.
Well, I mean, if they don't believe, those are things that, you know what I mean? Like, some people might believe that can happen, that you can be reincarnated, whatever.
Yeah.
Some people don't believe that. So if there's somebody who doesn't believe that, they just wouldn't, unless they're interested in the random crazy shit that their kid comes up with.
Well, that's another point. So if your kid says something like that, why would your kid say something like that?
Yeah.
And okay, let's say we're going to take reincarnation off the table. Why would a 2-year-old kid say something like that? Did they see something disturbing on the news? Did they overhear somebody telling a story about something horrific? So maybe the thing to do is also to de-escalate it or decompress that by asking questions, so that the kid has an outlet, a way to release that, to talk about it, so that you can assure them it didn't happen. Whatever those things are. So I think that that's my best advice for those kinds of situations. Ask questions of the kid, open-ended questions, not closed-in, not like saying, no, honey, God doesn't let that happen. That is a closed question. You ask open-ended questions, because whether it's from the kid's own imagination or it's from a true previous life memory, that kid needs to release this, needs to talk about it.
I think in those situations, though, if the kid made any kind of claim, then what claims wouldn't be surprising? You know what I mean? Like, the kid says, I really like to make beef tacos. Why a kid says that? He has never made a taco in his life. So does that mean he's been reincarnated?
No, but there's a reason why that kid said that.
Yeah. So, but if you're a believer in reincarnation, then what? The kid said
where's the point between a kid just saying something random and then well, the point is this: if the kid said, "I like to make beef tacos," when I had my own restaurant down in downtown New Orleans, I made beef tacos all the time.
if the kid says something that does actually give you information, then that kind of, so like, or how about this? Somebody comes up to you on the street. They're an adult. They're not a kid. And they say, I really like to make beef tacos. Versus they come up and say, hey, you should get a lottery number with these numbers, and then you get a lottery ticket with those numbers and you win. You know what I mean?
No, what are you getting at?
So on one hand, it doesn't give you any information pertaining to your life.
Right.
Or anything you could then branch off from. Most
people don't exist for the edification of other people. And so your memory is just your memory. And how many times do we or anybody we know just come up with a random memory? I remember one time I was driving down the road. It's just a random memory. So a kid to say just this random memory is not at all unusual. Mm-hmm. For a kid to say, but after the car accident, I see the license plate number and it's this and you'll win the lottery. Mm-hmm. That's freaking weird. Because in normal, ordinary conversation and interaction with other people, you don't ordinarily if you don't give them that advice, because I'll tell you, if I knew the lottery numbers, screw you, I'm using those lottery numbers and I'm going to win.
So let's say you're sitting down and you're staring at this TV static on your TV, and you just are looking and you kind of see the words, I like beef tacos on the screen. Versus you looking at the TV static and you see, get these lottery numbers, and you see numbers. The difference is, so information allows you to make a decision that then increases your confidence. It increases your confidence that if you make a particular decision, given a situation, that you'll get a particular outcome. Essentially, that's what information is. If you're sitting down and you're scrying on your TV static and you see a coherent piece of information that apparently is real information, but has no consequence, then it wasn't information that is meaningful. If you see lottery numbers while you're scrying your TV, that really does allow you to confidently make a decision about, yes, okay, I'm going to win the lottery. So, like a kid's blabbering, blah, 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 and you transpose their blabbering into pixels, and then you watch it and you scry the pixels, and it tells you nothing. So my point is that...
What is your point?
My point is that there's a lot of noise in the universe, and it shouldn't be surprising at any level that there's a lot of noise. Like the kid says some random thing, that doesn't matter. But if they tell you something that then correlates with reality down the line,
that you can verify,
that was meaningful information.
And that's why I say you should ask questions.
Yes. Or if you're remote viewing things at home, trying to get the winning lottery number, it's meaningful if you actually get the winning lottery number. Or you're scrying your TV, it's meaningful if it actually gives you the winning lottery number. Versus you just see, let's say you're schizophrenic, and you're watching your hallucinations, and then you see the lottery numbers. And that's what you were looking for. You play the lottery with those numbers, you win. The hallucinations then were meaningful.
Okay, I just want to say there are a lot of people. At times I've gone from one side to the other of this belief that a lot of mental illness actually comes from somebody being able to experience or sense something beyond
what we typically
experience. Thanks to all of the people who contributed to this episode. Some of you may have noticed that we now have this podcast on YouTube, which is really exciting because you can comment directly and interact with other listeners, which I think is pretty darn cool. But if you want to get hold of us directly, our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. That's what you do on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.